Hi, my name is Aiden, and in this tutorial, I'll be explaining all of the options found in the login/out portion of your profile preferences. The options you'll find here are going to primarily affect your kiosks and log listings, including what questions you ask during login, if you want a QR code on your kiosks, and some visual options around what your students and staff see on these pages. Some options may not appear if you don't have the corresponding module in TracCloud, and those can be skipped for your setup. To get to this menu in the first place, go to Other, Other Options, Profiles, then click on your profile. Then click on Prefs at the end, and we'll be expanding this first menu here, Login/out. Before I explain these options, it's important to understand the difference between a kiosk and a log listing. They're essentially just two different perspectives of the same feature in TracCloud. A kiosk is a student-facing sign-in station that you might have open on a computer or tablet in your center. Students themselves would then use that kiosk to log their visits, and they cannot access anything beyond the login and logout process. A log listing, on the other hand, is the staff-facing version of that view, which allows staff to help students sign in or sign out, or to view who's currently signed into the center. Most of the options that we see here are going to affect both of these pages, and I'll explain the exceptions as we go along. These first few options here let you choose what questions you're asking students as they're being logged into your center. For a tutoring center, we often see subject and reason being asked, but maybe not consultant. For advising, we usually see consultant and reason, but typically not subject. Either way, you can ask consultant on logout if you want as well, so students can choose who they worked with as they're leaving the center. For the consultant questions, you can make them optional or required. The subject and reason choices are inherently required if you enable them. Keep in mind that if students are logging in for an appointment, some details from their appointment, like the consultant, will carry through to their visit even if you aren't asking for that during login. For each field, you can choose its size. This is purely a visual preference. The number you see here is the number of choices shown on the screen at any given time. If there are more than this number of choices available, the student will have to scroll to see them. If you set this to 1, it will be a drop-down menu. Otherwise, it's going to be a scrollable list. Next is set initial status to waiting on login. If this is disabled, that means that when a student logs in, their visit instantly starts. When you're reporting on that visit later, you're going to see it taking place from that moment until whatever time they logged out. If we enable this option, an extra step gets added to that process. The student logs in, but their visit doesn't start yet. They're waiting to start their visit, usually until their consultant is ready. Then a staff member can go to the log listing and start their visit like this. Later on, you'll be able to report on when the student logged in, when their visit started, and of course when they logged out. Their wait time and visit time will be separated. If you do enable it though, the maximum wait time option lets you set a threshold for when a visit's wait time changes to red on the log listing, just a small indicator letting you know a student has been waiting for longer than expected. Format to display subject is another purely visual option. This will control how much information is displayed about the student's subject choices when they're logging in. So if your students aren't familiar with the section code or CRN of their enrollments, you can choose not to display them. Next up, we have Order for Kiosk Login. This determines what order the questions are asked during login. Now, if you only ask for subject and reason like this doesn't really matter. You can set it either way. But once you add consultant into the mix, then we'll unlock a bunch more options. If I ask subject, then reason, then consultant, I can have TracCloud filter the list of consultants based on the subject and reason the student chose, or vice versa, with the consultant choice filtering the subject and reason options. There are also a few options that affect the list of consultants in the first place, so you can only show consultants who are logged in for work, even in the same center specifically, or consultants who have a drop-in availability at the current time. If your student import contains a primary consultant ID value for students, you can also choose to only show that consultant as well. This one is pretty rarely used though. On top of the list of actual consultants available, you can also have a generic first available choice that students will always be able to select. If you turn this one on, you can choose which centers will have this choice over here on the left. For now, I'm going to turn off the consultant field for my example. Next up is show location when logging into an appointment. Another minor one, you can have this show the room number or another physical location within your center while they're logging in. You can also show this information on the student's dashboard and in the confirmation email, so this is just one more avenue to inform the student about their appointment. The last checkbox here, show all appointments in related centers if logging in via kiosk, is one of a couple options we have available to try and prevent mistakes when logging in. With this option disabled, let's say a student has an appointment in Center A. Then at their appointment time, they mistakenly try to log in for a visit in Center B. In that case, TracCloud is just going to start an unrelated drop-in visit in Center B, and their appointment will be marked as missed unless a staff member goes back and corrects it. With this option enabled, however, in that same scenario, TracCloud will ask during the Center B login if the student actually wants to start their visit in Center A instead because they have an appointment. This offers a route to record the correct visit during the sign-in attempt rather than needing to correct it later. After that, we have the delay for welcome and goodbye messages. These control how long the login and logout windows remain open if left idle. If a student starts logging in, gets to that screen where we're asking them these questions up here, and then walks away, how long should TracCloud wait? You'll have to consider the kinds of questions you're asking on the login or logout process for these. If you're only asking for subject during login and maybe no extra questions at all during logout, then you can safely set this to a pretty low value, such as 10 seconds. But if you have text entry areas or questions that students might need to pause to think about, you should set this to a higher value so it doesn't unexpectedly close the form on them. 30 seconds is a pretty typical value for both of these fields, but adjust as needed for your profile. Delay for log listing refresh is how often the kiosk and log listing will automatically reload to show the latest information. 60 is the minimum and is what I'll select for this example. The student and consultant satisfaction questions let you ask how the visit went on a simple 1 to 5 scale. Not as in-depth as a full SurveyTrack survey, of course, but it can give you some quick insight on how visits are going. This is one of those options where you have to keep in mind that this affects both the kiosk and the log listing. If you're using student-facing kiosks, then consultant satisfaction should be left unchecked, since we probably don't want students answering that one. If you still want to record consultant feedback on their visits without this logout question, your other options include visit notes, SurveyTrack surveys, or you can even create custom fields that look very similar to the satisfaction question. Those topics will be covered in future videos. Show resources checked out on logout does exactly what it says. If you're using the resources feature in TracCloud to track item usage, this one will show any outstanding resources the student has while they're concluding their visit. Quick visit required fields applies to both quick visits and editing visits in general. So even if a visit was recorded on a kiosk, if you were to go back to that visit later to make adjustments, these options would also apply at that point. You can choose which fields must not be left blank to prevent staff from creating visits, missing consultants, or missing subjects to ensure your data is as accurate as possible. For any of these fields, if there's a case where it's valid for it to be left blank in a visit, like an independent study visit missing a consultant, then that field should be left unchecked here. Log list customization is next, and this is a topic I'm not going to go super in-depth on in this video. We'll get a basic configuration in place, but you can go much farther with how you customize these views. Documentation on this will be available in the description, and there will be a video on this topic later down the line. There are 3 different views we can customize here: the kiosk view and the log listing view, like I mentioned earlier. And we also have this queue mode, which is an alternate view accessible from the log listing. We'll talk about that one in a bit. The log listing is the best place to start here. This is where we decide what fields are shown to our staff when they open the log listing for your centers. We can start by clicking this clipboard icon on the right to load a simple default configuration. We'll see a bunch of common fields added to the display, and here's what that would look like in practice. Now we might not be using wait time, so I'm going to remove those fields. And I might also want to add in the faculty name for their section. So I'll click the blue space here, add field, faculty. We can click and drag to place it in a different column, and you can narrow or widen columns as needed by clicking in the blue space. The log listing layout can either be set to tiles or vertical list. Vertical list will show students vertically, taking up the entire width available. This might be preferred if you have a lot of information shown for each visit. Otherwise, we usually see our clients using tiles, which will show students side by side in a more compact list. If you go with tiles, you can set the width between the tiles here. 10 is pretty common, but you can play with it and see what works best. Here's another simple comparison. Additionally, if you want to change the style of individual fields, you can click on it in the list and change its format, show or hide the label, make it bold or italic, etc. We'll save these options for another time in our tutorials, or again, you can read the documentation in the description in the meantime. That's our log listing good to go. Now we'll go up to our kiosk view. Keep in mind that this is what your students will see when they walk up to a kiosk in your center. So the most common field configuration here is nothing at all. Not adding a single field here means that no information will be shown about other students in the center. You may still want to adjust the layout though, as this will still affect how compact the remaining buttons and options display. Kiosk passphrase would be for editing the consultant or status of a visit from the kiosk view. You'd click on the field you want to edit, enter your passphrase, and then you can change the value. This is pretty rarely used and would require showing these fields on the kiosk in the first place. We typically recommend using the log listing instead if possible. Scrolling down again, we have the queue list view. This one's accessible from the log listing. You'll be able to toggle into and out of this view as needed. The use case for this is usually for wait lists. So if you have a lobby where your students are waiting, you can show a list of students logged in and where they are in the queue. This of course means you won't want to show as much information as the log listing, but still more than a kiosk, so we can manage this view independently of the others. It's edited in the same way, however. Show QR code is next. This gives your students another way to log in on kiosks, so in addition to just being able to type their ID or scan their barcode, they can scan this QR code with their phone, then type in their ID on their own device to log in or out. The QR codes are only valid for a few minutes at a time, so they always need to return to the kiosk to log out or start their next visit. If you make the QR code clickable, that means on a kiosk you can click the QR code with your cursor to open the same login process that would otherwise be seen on the student's phone. This is more commonly used for testing purposes. I'd recommend leaving this unchecked for regular use. The QR code is 300 pixels wide by default, which is what you saw in the example above, but if you feel like that's too small or too large, you can adjust that here. Next is the option that enables the queue mode above, as well as the work visit login buttons on the kiosk and log listing. If you aren't using either of these features, you can disable this to streamline those views. For those work visit logins, you can also control whether or not the work visit buttons appear on the custom kiosks specifically. We'll talk more about custom kiosks in the next profile preferences video. After that, we have some options around identifying students for login. By default, no matter what you choose here, students can type in their ID, their other IDs, username, or scan their barcode to sign in. But what if they type in their name, like Jane Doe? Is that something you want to allow? If you do allow students to sign in with their name, I'd also recommend checking Require Single Record Found. This means that if a student types in Jane, they won't be presented a list of Janes to choose from. But if they type in Jane Doe, and assuming they're the only active Jane Doe in the system, they'll be able to log in. This does mean that students with common full names might not be able to sign in like this. They will need to use another identifier instead. Prevent sign-in during class time can be used if you're importing section schedule data. If checked, that means if a student has class from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m., they will not be able to log in for a visit in that window. Otherwise, there's no restriction. Filter registrations allowed for sign-in is another seldom used option. You can create a saved search on your registration listing, then link that saved search here to prevent students from signing in unless their registration is returned by that search criteria. Typically, the course list in your center will cover all of your filtering needs, so we can leave this blank. The last few options here all relate to the prospective student feature. That will have its own video in the future, but to quickly explain, allow user to generate a prospect enables the prospective student button on the log listing in kiosk. You can then rename the button and set a unique subtitle that appears when the button is clicked. If you have any questions about setting up your profile, you can reach out to our help desk at helpdesk.go-redrock.com or give us a call at 480-752-8533.